All right. Good morning, everybody. Really appreciate everybody hopping on today for a webinar, and very excited to be able to introduce Rolando from Click Safety, who's going to join us today for a presentation on 10 things to know about OSHA 10. All right, so we'll do some quick backgrounds. Rolando, I'll let you do the honors of going first, and then I'll go ahead and go second.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining. And again, thank you for your time and your attendance. We look forward to making this productive for you. My name is Rolando Cedillo with Click Safety as the Corporate Director of Compliance. My role has been about 30 years in the experience level of environmental, health, and safety. And now the term we look at is wellness, both in civil, construction, aerospace, working from the field on up, all the way into the C-suite, and also participated in a number of EPP program implementations. So a little bit of my background.
David Wald, I'm going to moderate today for Rolando. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Acclaimant. I've been doing Acclaimant for about 7 years now, give or take, since about 2013, 2014. Prior to this, I spent part of my life as a venture capitalist with the Light Bank Fund, the guys who founded Groupon, and prior to that, as a strategic management consultant back in the corporate days. But really excited to kind of bring this presentation to you guys today. Rolando's got a ton of really interesting information to share, and we'll go from there. All right, so for today, we'll go through kind of the 10 things you should know about the OSHA 10. So everything from what is the training, kind of how is the program grown, and what are the benefits, where safety and training converge, thinking about general versus specialized trainings, and then the difference between onboarding customers and OSHA 10. And then we'll do kind of a Q&A with myself and Rolando to kind of hit through a couple of items. And again, as you guys have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. If appropriate, we'll kind of loop them in on the slides. And if not, we'll make sure there's a little bit of time at the end to kind of knock through those things. So to start, Rolando, what is OSHA 10 training for those that do not know?
OSHA 10 is a very strong orientation process that was created by OSHA in the 1970s. It was driven around the development of onboarding personnel as an orientation for general industry and construction. Those are the two primary areas that we're going to talk about. It's voluntary, so most companies either create a program of their own or stick with a structure that's been both tried and tested, and strong quality assurance from a program standpoint. It's intended to bring health and safety as well as the workers' rights and keep programs into the knowledge of the worker, so that when a new worker arrives, as kind of some of the walkthrough here, they begin by walking in and seeing how things are structured and operated. Because imagine if you were a new worker on a job site, and the first day as an employer, your employee's coming in through the shop warehouse, through the turnstile, coming in the first gate to get into the location. He's never been on the job site. He's kind of walking in blind, or she is walking in blind, trying to understand what's going on. OSHA saw this and said, hey, how do we bridge an orientation process for people going into a construction world, a general industry world, manufacturing, or some other type of operation like a warehouse? Because if they come in and they're not unexperienced, they're really showing up to the job, and somebody's going to lead them to go do something, go get this something, start doing this. Now in our workforce, those kind of generate some of that walking blind concept to see what the day is all about, to just what's happening from the activity of what do I feel about the company? Am I understanding where I'm supposed to be doing and what's missing, to the potential of getting hurt? And of course, lack of training, experience, how to direct that. OSHA really said, how do we bridge some of the key issues with the number of citations and significant incidents that have occurred in our industry to help bridge that? And the OSHA 10 in the general industry and construction really cover those two bases.
Wonderful. And for those that don't know, Rolando, why is it called OSHA 10? What does 10 represent?
So the 10 is a representation of hours of training. And so what OSHA devised was a number of topics that were considered to be required conversations to be had, like worker rights. What information should be available for employees to know about an OSHA log? What's the mission of OSHA? What's its standards and enforcement applications? What happens if I have a complaint and I do a whistleblowing situation? All the way to required training specific to general industry or construction in key areas where people have been systemically been getting hurt where your insurance rates are coming up because you had ladder falls. Someone has mixed a chemical and it's incorrect. And OSHA started structuring these both in a general industry or in a construction with moving equipment and crushing situations or impacts of just hazards that a construction site would be completely different from an industry manufacturing site. It divides it in those 10-hour windows, gave electives and options, and students then can go through and go through topics that are of interest to them.
Wonderful. Great. All right. And so help us understand. So the OSHA 10 has been around for a while, but can it help us understand both, I guess, how it's grown over time, as well as what the benefits would be for people who are interested in the OSHA 10 program?
So OSHA 10 is, like I said, it's been around since 1970. In the operations, they've bringing in about 15,000 instructors now onto the workforce. They teach in different languages, English, Spanish. I've seen conversations in Polish as some of the terminology that was defined. It's intended to promote a culture between a peer and peer, to a peer to supervisor review, because along with an OSHA 10 and 10 hours of specific topics, there's also a supervisor course called an OSHA 30. We'll talk about that in a different conversation, but the 10 is really intended to bring a supervisor in to tailor what is expected. What does good look like from a ladder safety? How does a chemical look when I'm actually dealing with it in a powder, gas, or liquid form on a production floor, or it's in my conics on a trailer? And how does that audience then understand what's the right and wrong thing to do based on our regulations? It goes over a lot of the rights of the employees and then the value of what happens with new employees coming in from our workforce that's seasoned and been here and done this before, to those that are new and our younger workforce coming in for the first time into an industry that they're learning from.
And I think the other thing that's nice here too, as we kind of had been speaking about, is the world has changed a lot since 1971, especially in the past few years. So knowing that the program has grown and changed over time, I think is also kind of good for employers to think about kind of how do I provide not just training to my team, but relevant training to my team as well.
And that's been a big driver, again, historically, where incidences have occurred is a trending indicator of where citations are occurring from. Guess what? The last 3 years have been significant with OSHA and complaints. 70% of the complaints have been around COVID-related issues. When I talk about wellness, we sprinkle that into the health side of the world, but wellness really becomes your employees able to come back to work, and do they know what's expected on a job site, all the way to what do I do if something's not right, and how do we communicate that down the chain of command within an organization to address these issues before they get out of hand. And you have a workforce that now is exposed. So it kind of broadens that horizon all the way to making information shared consistent for employees. And that's one of the things that we'll talk about with Click Safety.
All right. So as we're going to think about the OSHA 10, right, not every business is the same. And so I think they've done a nice job of splitting out both, I guess, some of the construction components versus general industry. So can you kind of help us understand how the OSHA 10 applies to each of those different industries or industry types?
In the general industry world, there's really an emphasis consistent with what's happened from emission statements and employer workforce and whistleblowing. What has been added to and incorporated is more of what happens like in a general industry. We have walking, working surfaces, access issues. We have exit routes and emergency actions, fire protection plans, where our plans used to cover emergencies, weather related, as we're now dealing with this current last year and this year, storms, fires, tornadoes. Now we have active shooter situations. All these become incorporated into the bigger picture of what your emergency plan should look like in fire plans, because they're hazards that OSHA would say, is there something present that could occur? Electrical, from 50 volts and higher, of people working around equipment. What personal protective equipment is needed? How does hazard communication come into play with the chemicals that I deal with and mix in a shop area, in a small building, all the way to electives, which then become, how do I handle this material, which is bulky, odd shaped, and I need to move it from one place to another? If I've got equipment that I'm operating, how does guarding come into play so I avoid an amputation? How do I look at other problem-solving conversations around communicating with my employer? How do I bring a safety concern up so it's understood? How do I talk to my supervisor? My supervisor can have that conversation with me about addressing a safety concern or walking through a solution for something and a better education process from a procedure. And how is it safe to speak up, or how do I address with stopping a permit? Those are some of the optional courses that are available. In the construction world, of course, same mission as far as objectives there, but now you're focusing on the four types of hazards that people have gotten hurt on, and they become struck by. They've been caught in between what's life safety from a PPE perspective and what are the health hazards, because as you'll see in a minute, we've got a number of things that relate to not just injuries, but also illnesses that have occurred in the field. In the construction world, electives can be cranes and derricks and hoists. We move things with mechanical equipment. What are the safety precautions that are required? What does a crane operator look at while an employee is walking around his work area and moving material around? How do we look at scaffoldings? How do we look at ladders, which is the most common thing people get on, and the number one reason for injuries to occur? And back over to the problem solving and communication. Why did OSHA look at these two? Well, it's because in 1970, they realized they were having a number of deaths. The numbers were there. 14,000 people died that were reported. 2.5 million people were disabled, 300,000 illnesses. Statistics from last year, 4,764 have deceased with deaths occurring on the job site. That's somebody's mother, somebody's father, somebody's brother, somebody's sister that had this happen to them. 2.7 million still injured. And in the illness side, like I said, COVID related, has driven to 544,000. Those then have been the reasons for the required training. Insignificant ones, falls, electrical, have been big ones. A lot of issues around the complaint side. OSHA is seeing 32 or 35 complaints a week in the field from different concerns. And a big emphasis on that is around COVID related constraints that, hey, something doesn't look right. Something's going on here. I need more information. We want to bridge that information so the employee, first time coming out, is comfortable with what he or she is going to do on the job site and know who to talk to.
Right. And I think the other interesting thing as we were talking about this is that this is not just an investment in protecting the company. The beauty of providing a course like this is also it's an investment into each of the employees and kind of building out their knowledge set as well. And if you wouldn't mind talking about that for a second, that also I think would be a great point to add.
One of the biggest emphasis is an individual employee. You're wanting to have them obtain a injury-free career. And you remember the first time you went to a job site or went to a place that was unique, summer work job, work at a retail shop. I worked oil and gas and was a rough hand in the field. Nobody told you what to do. You went and got things done and you kind of figured things out as best you could.
Yep.
Our workforce now needs to have some of that indoctrination so that the first day they're on the job to the 100th day to the 30th year of their career, they have a good basis of understanding of what and why. That makes a better injury-free career for a worker because as he or she is learning from these situations, they're gaining more knowledge of what we do. Why our work practices here? Hey, I had an observation. Where do I put that? Are we using an electronic tool to keep observations? How many times are we seeing people using the wrong ladder or it's not fixed right that needs servicing? What are we gathering with that information so that we become more proactive in the safety side, similar to voluntary protection program, a health and safety plan that lets that employee be more knowledgeable of what is right or wrong on a job site and how to speak up about those things so that we don't have the why situations generated every day in our workforce because it does account for significant amount of incidences.
Yep, right. As we go to the next slide, I think that just to reinforce, I think it's interesting to think about safety as both an investment in your team and investment in your company as well. Speaking of that, I guess, one of the big questions that comes out here, right, is, well, I already do onboarding. So if I'm doing onboarding, why would I need an OSHA 10 as well? Or what would I gain out of doing OSHA 10 in addition to onboarding?
Leading companies do a great job of onboarding and they have a systematic process that says, I onboard my employees and they go from there to the site specifics and training. But some new employees need to get the basis of what and why things are in place. So we might give you the top 10 rules of the house rules for a shop or a construction site. We post those. But what about the other 100 rules that are out there? OSHA really wants to create that great orientation that covers a lot of arenas where somebody says, I hardly ever use a ladder, but that one time that I did, something happened. I never mix with chemicals because we don't think so, but we changed our processes and now we have something to include. The orientation is really a broad perspective of the most common events that occur to raise that awareness at the employee level. At the company level, you're managing a risk because if you, as you are introducing new things, you're still going to have to do your onboarding. You may do site-specific training, but you are now receiving a consistent set of information, timely. And that's the other challenge with orientations and training. Sometimes our trainers, when I talk to them, they're like, well, this is my fifth orientation today. And I might have skipped something because, boy, I don't remember if I already talked about that before. And where our challenge becomes is consistent orientations, consistent onboarding, and then what's your roadmap for the safety requirements that are expected so that a worker comes in and receives that. He's mentored and given some guidance and understands what the company policies are for work practices. And then really knows where that information, and he can be both a good learner, a good mentor, and he can be part of creating your safety culture across the board so that you're not seeing those injuries and incidences that cost you money and impact your business. Have OSHA to come in and see you because something wasn't right. If you look at it as a company perspective, those values are also added. But capturing those and bringing those numbers in, very important.
And said it better myself. So this is actually one of, I think, the more interesting parts of the conversation. Is obviously technology is kind of permeating every part of every aspect of our lives, and especially in the worlds of construction and industry as it relates to safety and training. But I guess, Rolando, to go ahead and tee it up for you, you talked to us a little bit about kind of how technologies had a role in kind of how the OSHA 10 training has evolved.
Well, technology is playing a role both from the online training world. The, the, the holdup we had over being able to do in-person course training, which was a big challenge for us during the pandemic, the number of people that could be in a given room, how many people we could orient at a given time still is a structure. But what OSHA did is they were allowed online training to be created through current providers, Click Safety being one of those. That consistent of information was now set up 7/24, 365. So if you're at home, pandemic or none, you were able to, and still are able to, take that coursework in a consistent and timed manner to meet both the requirements that OSHA has, cover every topic specifically, so there's nothing missed or did I remember what to talk about in the slide pack or not, to the delivery of a certificate and the OSHA card that an employee would have to present and say, here's where I've got my good basic orientation out of the way, and I'm able to provide that. Because of the changes of OSHA, this took place, and there's a lot of emphasis there. There's still the classroom training, but sometimes when you're in classroom trainings, you're getting a coursework where 3 students are from your industry, 4 are from another, 5 are from another organization, and they're really getting different perspectives, which is good, but sometimes not specific to your work. Where technology has come a long way has also been by being able to provide that information of tracking information. As I mentioned earlier, what do you do when you see something that's not right? Well, I'm going to tell someone. Now the tools have now evolved so that we can take this information and do it online and submit information quickly and efficiently. That becomes in a tool that can be analyzed more efficiently, and you can do something about it. Does it require a safety meeting because we've got an issue that's coming up that's consistent across the field? Is it specific to a set of workers because ladders are an issue and we're not doing the right inspection or in our equipment? We've got motorized equipment that doesn't have backup alarms and nobody's really saying anything. And I think they're inspecting their equipment, but that hasn't been automated. So we're not always able to check and balance some of those things. Technology has brought both the orientation and training to be at your fingertips. Tablet, computer, sometimes all the way down to our phones, depending on the technology and its application, all the way to capturing that information, including the tool, which is a camera now, can actually document some of that information for sharing. You could also do your first report if you need to, because you've got a timeline to meet for reporting requirements. That's the value of technology coming in at your fingertips.
Yep. No, and I think it's really interesting here as we kind of think about the expectation now of the employees everywhere is they want everything iPhoned or Appled, right? That it looks good, it's easy to use, I can get it
Yes.
wherever I want. Like training used to be the thing where you stunk your shoulders, and they're fine. Training day 2, day 3, day 4, and now they're like, no, I want to do training while I'm watching The Wire, like for the 15th time, on Saturday night. I want it on my phone. I want to be able to pull it up wherever I am. And so I think on the training side specifically, I think the fact that we can now get training where people are means they can get the information they need whenever they need it. Does that sound fair?
Yes, it does. And you bring an interesting point because our society is now in a different schedule of time, nocturnal and or day. Things
Yes.
happen at different intervals. I'm getting used to that. Apologize. I have to have a headset because that's the only way I can pay complete attention. Not my world. I'm
Yep.
learning. And is at the end of the day, how do we blend those two tools to make it beneficial? This is what we're trying
Yep.
to do with Click and Claim.
Yep. Perfect. When we think about the framework here, I think that there's three interesting things I'm going to call out, which is, our framework is learn, do with data. But I think the technology, I think, helps kind of get the information to people's heads now, which is the learn side of it. I think, as Rolando was talking about, I think that there's the do side where technology also helps people do the things they've learned. I'm doing an audit and I have the support tool in front of me. I'm doing an inspection. I'm doing a first report. I'm doing my OSHA log. And then on the data side, I think the really interesting thing here is when you start to go ahead and combine the learning and the doing and seeing how those things mirror together and figuring out how the things we're learning are impact the things that are happening and being done, and then adjusting the learning schedule going forward and tracking effectiveness. I think when those things come together, I think it starts to go ahead and create a really powerful closed loop cycle that actually means training's not just a check the box. It's a thing where you can look back and say, oh my God, our slip and falls are down 40%. Our premiums are down 30% because our claims down 50%. All these things I think are now possible because learning, doing, and having the data to bring it together, I think is now a thing that's no longer a pipe dream.
Now bring that back over to the big picture of how much time do we have in our day. I appreciate the attendance time that we've got allotted here. We hope to wrap this up with the right information at the right time. But imagine if you could get an hour back of your day of not having to look and skim through every report that you could see, and you could have that analyzed for you. If you knew that your consistent safety training had good, solid information and it was there for reference, and you had something to go back and look at because a new employee could go back and gather information about a specific topic and say, hey, something that came up, and here's an idea of a solution. It bridges that knowledge base. Now, you mentioned earlier insurances. When they come in and want to see your programs, they want to see all those pieces of the puzzle, and they want to know how they're integrated and working, all of value.
Exactly. So I know we're kind of coming up on the end here, so we're going to go to my favorite part, the speed round. So we're going to go we're going to go rapid fire with Rolando and get 10 things to know about the OSHA 10. We've hit some of these, so for the ones we've hit, we'll kind of just go with short reminders here. But I guess first up, number one is OSHA training online is valuable as in person.
Yes, consistent, deliverable, and cost savings. Because by the time you look at the cost of training and sending someone to a classroom, time away, travel, versus doing it in online, there's a significant savings of about 25%, 20%.
Perfect. Number two, how can risk managers select courses or topics that are specific to their companies?
Sure. Most organizations will have a matrix of what their crafts personnel will be taking and what's required. There's a selection option of saying, I can then, through a database, identify all of the courses that are important to me, assign those to an administrative portal, and then be able to show compliance to that. Those tools that help manage your risk because you structured it once for the year. You go back and review every year and see that your programs are working, or do you need to do other emphasis?
Perfect. Number three, how does OSHA 10 promote adoption of a safety culture?
As I mentioned earlier, you remember the day you walked in your first job kind of blind and trying to figure it out without a good indoctrination. A friend of mine was saying, yeah, the first time I walked into a kitchen, I saw that hot oil boiling and stuff was going and fries were flying and there was stuff on the floor. What do I do? It all begins with that and saying, should all that be in place? Yeah, the cooking operations, yes, but all those other slip, strips, and hazards may not have to be, all the way to the PPE that they require. It helps bridge that culture by knowing what you're stepping and walking into for the first time at your new job site.
Yep, I think that's a great segue into how can it help with employee retention and burnout?
Look at our society over the last 3 years. If I drive down the road, how many for hire opportunities are there? And how many times do I hear a positive or a negative comment about the employer or the workplace or things that are morale driven. Morale is part of safety. Positivity adds to that. It'll help you retain. It'll help you build a culture. It'll also help you bring new employees, which is part of our challenge to bring them on board.
Perfect. How can teams ensure that the takeaways are continuously practiced for everyone who participates?
This is where your observation process and your peer-to-peer conversations, because it's a whole program. OSHA has a health and safety program that really kind of encompasses what a management commitment looks like, what an individual employee's perspective and responsibilities and expectations. And it's a two-way street that collaborates on these issues. It brings that technology and the opportunity to work across the board.
Wonderful. And I'm going to skip number 6. I feel like we beat up how does technology play in organizations' safety culture, the last one. But I think if you guys have questions on that, watch the tape or ping Rolando or me at the end here. I think we can talk about this
by
all
all
day.
means.
Number 7, where can we figure out direct or indirect cost of an injury?
OSHA's got a great website. It's OSHA Safety Pays program. And you take a situation and say, I'll give you 2 examples, an amputation. And an amputation cost is about $105,000 of indirect cost, about $95,000 direct cost. They'll give you those summations, and it'll also give you an ROI and return on your investment. Because as a business, somebody is asking you justify what you're doing in your programs. This tool can help you with that. It's available through OSHA. Very, very valuable.
Yep. And then again, in terms of justifying then cost, how is training tied back to ROI, and how do teams get the most cost-effective training?
Anybody that's in business has a budgetary process. If it's fiscal year or calendar year, you sit down and you plan, I have 100 employees that I need to train. What training is required? What's optional? Are they now using special equipment? How do we use that to really cost effectively look at it? And is going to a classroom, setting up an instructor, having their availability to teach that value, or is it online where I can take it over a calendar year, 3 or 4 hours in a given month, able to manage that and reduce some of the overtime costs or additional costs that might come into play because you're working it through the process.
Okay. And then as people think about this, what success metrics are important to track for safety organizations?
From lagging to leading indicators, I always, in my previous life, tracked training to see, did we complete? Are we percentage-wise completed what we're doing? How is that looking from our incident rates to our near misses or observations? And are there gaps that are needed? Then you really look at your program and say, do I have good morning meetings, weekly tailgate talks, safety huddles that are going on, stop works, or monthly safety meetings that I have to bridge all of that into? Those metrics are just part of that process. And a good tool, like an online tool, can really help you with that.
Wonderful. And then last up here, just to kind of round it out, how do metrics on training, application of training, and delivery help the bottom line of any organization?
Well, it was interesting. I was listening to one of our trainers that does a lot of work in the Arizona world. And they mentioned a conversation that says, my metrics of training is I see my day go long. I know my quality of information delivered was wrong, but I also saw it in the scores. I also saw in the students' attention, because by the end of the day, like you said, oh my, I'm sitting here, let me see if I can pay attention at the last minute. We really want that crisp, fresh, and available, and that's what online training does. It helps do that because it's never tired. It's 724, 365, but it also keeps you a consistent message, and that helps your bottom line.
Perfect. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No worries.
Great. I guess as we're kind of rounding out here, if people have questions, please feel free to start dropping them in the Q&A in the chat, and we'll kind of answer them here in about 2 slides. And then at the end of the presentation, there's a brief survey as well that should pop up. So please stick around for that if you guys have time. So Rolando, if people want to know more about Click Safety, where should they go? What should they do?
Sure. Please hit our website. You've got Brian Carpenter, one of our managers for the group, available for calls. Like us through LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter. We'd be glad to have conversations with you or walk you through kind of what we've experienced from the required to the best practices, all available through our Click Safety website, including our customer service.
Awesome. And then on the acclaimant slide, on the acclaimant side, for those interested in finding ways to operationalize the safety practices they're kind of finding, again, at our website, acclaimant.com, sales@acclaimant.com, LinkedIn, or Twitter. If you're a customer of either organization, you can also reach out to your representative, and they're happy to make a warm introduction to the appropriate contacts at the appropriate other organization here. I think we've found a real nice fit between the two organizations, so it's kind of exciting to see customers that I think can get some mutual benefit here either way.
Correct.
Let's see, with that, any questions that we have? There's a note here from Douglas Hine. I think said it perfectly. Build the people, and the people will build the business. I could not agree with that anymore. I think especially these days, and I think Rolando, you would agree. It's incredible how if you take away the things that are distracting, dangerous, the things that can actually hurt someone from doing the thing you want them to do, because safety isn't most people's full-time job. Safety is the thing that they do to help make sure they can do their full-time job. And so if you find more ways to invest in your employees, keep them safe, give them the ability and the confidence to go to work and come back every morning, I think that they will then pay you back in spades, which are organizations who invest in safety and safety technologies and safety training and kind of making a safe environment, I think are the ones that will ultimately be the winners here.
Agree. Empowering them and builds your business 100%. They're what make you or break you.
Awesome. I don't see any more questions there, so thank you guys all for sticking on long. Rolando, this is super helpful. Really appreciate it. Again, anyone has any questions, we will circle this after the meeting. And for anybody who wasn't able to attend, we'll also be able to review it then. We look forward to bringing you guys more and interesting topics. And again, please fill out the survey that's going to pop up after this is all done. Everyone have a great day, and we'll talk to you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.